Good evening, all.
Hi, good evening, Christo. Uh, we'll get started in a minute.
Yeah,
Let's start at sharp at 8. So I mean 8 here.
all good. I see some joiners from Cape Town. I think that's pretty much just after 4 there.
Uh, Hello, friends. Good evening. Really great to get to see all of you turning out on a Friday evening back here in India. And the good thing is we're getting folks from all parts of the world. So we have a few from Netherlands, few from Cape Town, got a few from India back here in India. So today is going to be our final session for the Europe Product Week, and I believe most of you have already been kind of watching quite a few of these sessions in person as well. So let me share you a little bit brief about what we have covered so far. And after that, I'll be introducing you to our speaker for today, Mr. Christo. And I'll give you a little brief about Mr. Christo, and then possibly you can take it up from there. I'll hand over the mic to Christo, and from there, we'll kind of continue with the session. Post the session, what you would do is you would also want to kind of have a quick chat to understand some question and answers that we would seek from Christo around the topic that he plans to cover today. So a quick walkthrough of how this week went through for all of us. So these are the 4 sessions that we had planned for this entire Europe week, wherein we invited product managers from across Europe. And we had a really great learning experience from most of them. So 15th November, 15 November, as you see, we kicked off with the first session, which was the 90 days as a product manager, the first 90 days, because that's the defining point for every product manager. If you're really going to make it into that company and you're going to stick with that product and you're really going to contribute back to the world. The second one that we had, which was on 16 November, which was Calming the Chaos in Product Management by Daniel. And this one was another interesting session wherein we understood that in a product management role, the biggest challenge is you are meant to kind of handle chaos, and that's basically a job description, right? So if you're a product manager, chaos is possibly the only thing that you'll be getting every day. So how do you handle yourself? I mean, how do you handle yourself? How do you handle the team? How do you handle the product? And how do you handle your customers? That's something that we had a pretty good exposure in the second session. Now, moving on to the third one, which was the last one that we had on 17, which was yesterday. So this was about how do you move into product management without product management experience. In fact, Mara, I think, had come in from a sales background. Okay, so coming from a sales, walking into a product management role, that's a pretty interesting journey. And this calls in for a thought process that is product management really a particular job that requires a prior qualification? The answer is not. It's more of about a thought process as opposed to just a job description. You got to build that thought process to be in this field, and once you have that kind of thought process, then making a cut in this field is not going to be a big task. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to learn firsthand from Christo Goosen, who is a group product manager at Sennder. Sennder it's a logistic company, or rather a technology company that is helping logistics. Through Christo, what we really want to kind of acquire in today's session is going to be the topic around anti-fragile product manager. Now, we have heard about being fragile quite a bit as a product manager, but let's understand what Christo has to offer in this anti-fragile product management session. So a little bit background about Christo. Christo is originally from Cape Town, South Africa, and that's why I think he was really happy to see somebody who's hailing from South Africa, Cape Town. So that's where he was kind of from, and he spent his entire life working in digital products. Now, after he had completed his industrial design from design in South Africa in the mid 2000s, he completed his master degree in interaction design in Sweden. So he made a trip from South Africa to Sweden to kind of complete his masters. Now, after that, his career spanned across various industries, right from mobile phone designing to online gaming, community designing, and development. And before discovering product management years ago, so basically before he actually got into product management, these were all the things that he had done. And then eventually he landed up being in product, and he started off his job as a product manager. And he did work in quite a few of fintech companies. So he started off with quite a few small fintech companies, and then he moved on to really large retail corporates. And recently, since March, he's been working in the freight forwarding logistics space, which is basically Sennder, the company that is working right now, and it's one of the largest digital freight forwarding company in Europe. So that's a little bit about Christo, and I wouldn't want to kind of eat up into his time because the next 45 minutes is something that we would love to be very dedicatedly listening to what Christo has to kind of help us learn here. So I think Christo, I think you have a really interesting, I would say, profile, a background, and coming from possibly a non-product management into a product management course, and then working from small companies to really large companies. So we would really love to understand the idea of the anti-fragile product manager. And then at the end, please help us at least with five minutes of extra time so that we can come up with our list of questions and answers. So without any further delay, I'll hand it over to you, Christo. If you want, you can start with a quick recap of your intro, but if you want, you can directly jump into the topic.
No, thank you very much. Let me just also thank you for the opportunity to speak here. Let me get my screen share up. Quickly, give me a second. Yeah. And let me know when this is visible for everybody. Screen share okay?
Yeah, I think we can see it, yeah.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you. So, good afternoon, or I guess good evening rather. I know that for most of the audience, it's already well into Friday evening, and I really appreciate you giving up your Friday evening to listen to me talk about product management. So yeah, thank you for joining me. That's the last one of it by Insaid, and I hope that I can build on the quality content that's come before me. So as you can see for tonight, I have decided to use quite a simple black background, white text format here. It's not just because I'm very much a minimalist kind of person, but also I'm just trying to spare everybody's eyeballs because it's already dark out. Last thing you need is a bright white screen glaring at you. So this should take about 35 to 40 minutes, I think, the content of the speech, the webinar, and I'm leaving lots of room for questions at the end. I will also make a small one-pager summary available right at the end. I'll drop the link to that into the chat if anybody wants something like that. It's just a reference point and it will help because the slides are fairly simple and most of the content will come from me obviously speaking. So for those of you who joined late, didn't hear the intro, I'll give you a very brief introduction about me. So I'm Christo. And like I said, I've been in product management now for many years across a variety of different industries, variety of different companies, products, fintech, retail, food delivery, different platforms, app, web, WhatsApp's been used, even physical interactions. The companies have ranged in size from small startups, big old corporates, and scale-ups. So most recently, I am a group product manager at Sennder. And we are building the digital product for the logistics, for the future of logistics inside Europe. We aim to disrupt an industry that, well, I think the best word we can use is probably a little bit fossilized at times, very old school. And here we are, young company, scale up, building a tech product. So as the group product manager, my team and I've got a team of 6, we are responsible for the product powering our core brokerage services. It lives at the heart of the freight forwarding company. It's used by hundreds of our operators on a daily basis. And literally, this is what they spend all of their working day on. So this is our responsibility. But okay, that's enough about me. Let us get into the main topic of today and why you all have joined here. anti-fragile. So what is this thing? What exactly does this word anti-fragile actually mean? Perhaps some of you have read the very excellent book by Nicholas Nassim Taleb. Entirely credit him with coming up with the idea of anti-fragility, the philosophy behind it, the prequel that he's written, Black Swan. So if you haven't read either of those, highly recommend it, highly, highly recommend it. I can only urge you to add those to your reading list. And I know that any good product manager, you probably have a reading list that's quite extensive and ever growing, same as mine. But this book is special. Trust me, you can thank, if you've read it, you can thank me afterwards. So during the course of the next 35 minutes, 40 minutes, I'm going to talk about exactly this thing called anti-fragility, what it is, why it matters, and then most important and relevant to today, how do we apply this as a mindset to product management? So what it is, why it matters, and how do I apply it to product management? So this concept, applying this concept of anti-fragility, it's not meant as a digital thing. It's more of a general mindset. Applying this to the craft and the discipline of product management, and then fitting this all into probably quite badly into a presentation and not really doing it any justice because there's a lot of thought behind it. That is on me. So I spend a lot of time thinking about this, and I spend a lot of time trying to apply this mindset to my day-to-day life, when I practice product management, me and my team. I try to apply this. But I do not have all the answers. Let me be upfront. Let me be clear. I'm also figuring this out. So you'll see when the questions come up. And let me be very clear on this. I'm not here today. I'm not giving you a framework to end all frameworks. I'm not talking to you about the last methodology you will ever need. I mean, hardly that. I wouldn't trust anybody selling anything like that, anything claiming to be that. For me, that's pretty much on par with people selling snake oil, maybe a little bit above it. Besides, I don't know your product that you're working on. I don't know your industry. I definitely don't know your customer. So any general advice that I can give, like about specific methodologies and things like which method should I use to prioritize, or what is the perfect onboarding tactic for my customer? How do I increase my onboarding success rate for my product? Yeah, that's going to be quite vague, probably worthless. So for me, this is a mindset. It's not a methodology. So back to the first question that I posed. What exactly is this thing called anti-fragility? So let's talk about a word that everybody knows, fragile. So what comes to your mind when you hear that word? See the warning labels everywhere. Perhaps you think of something made of glass, a simple champagne glass, a mirror, perhaps even a flat screen, new QLED TV, giant flat screen TV. So say you were to take one of these items. You want to send it to someone, to a friend, family. How would you package this? You're going to ship it, and you want to ship it via post. You're going to hand it over to the postal service and trust them with your precious item. So I can guarantee you're going to take a great amount of care. You will carefully wrap it, bubble wrap, anything you can get your hands on. You will probably, most likely, slap giant fragile stickers on the outside of the box, warning labels, telling people, be careful with this. You're doing this because you wish to protect this item, protect it from shock, from impacts, from chaos and random events. Any one of those will cause damage to your precious item that you're entrusting to the postal service. Funny anecdote, quick aside, here in the Netherlands, the e-bike company, quite well known here, called Van Moof, they make really great bikes, and they've started shipping their bicycles in boxes with a picture of a TV on the outside, because they were adding fragile labels and that wasn't doing enough. It wasn't protecting the content. They were literally delivering, a fair amount of broken bicycles to their customers. Hardly ideal. So they went with this ruse. They redesigned the box. It looks like a TV and has a tiny bicycle in the corner. And this actually worked, according to all reports that I can find. And this is now the way that they ship all this stuff to customers. You buy a Van Moof, it arrives in a giant TV box. So the fragile. A shock or an impact unexpected event. These things harm the fragile. The fragile depends on safety, on certainty, on exactness, nothing that deviates. It means being harmed by randomness. It means being vulnerable to the unexpected. So what would be the opposite of this? And I mean, at this point, I'm not going to give anybody any points if they say anti-fragile, but I would have wagered money that had I started with a question and you had no idea of the topic of this webinar, you would have answered robust, solid, similar. Something that's robust certainly can withstand shocks and impacts, sudden changes and random events. However, withstanding something is not the opposite of being harmed by something. For something to be anti-fragile, it has to grow. It has to gain from random events, no matter how potent those are, no matter how unpredictable those are. Anti-fragility, something that is anti-fragile, gains from this randomness. It grows from the unpredicted. Take a candle, a random gust of wind blows out a candle. That same random gust of wind that hits a raging wildfire or hits a fire can turn that into a raging wildfire. Not always good, but anti-fragility grows stronger from chaos. If that wind keeps blowing, that fire keeps growing. Gets stronger, the more stressor, the more wind you add to it, the stronger it gets. So that is at the core of it. That is what is anti-fragility. But now, onwards. We know what it is. Why does it matter? Theories, schmeries. Why does this matter? Yeah, it's a cute little idea. Anti-fragility, something that grows from random, unpredicted events. Why does this matter to me? Why does it matter to you? Why does it matter to anybody in product management? And the reason is we cannot predict the future. We suck at it. We are really, really bad at predicting the future. And for us as product managers, this is bad because we are actually in the business of trying to predict the future. We are trying to develop our products and to build our products for what we think our customers want, what we think our market wants, what we think will work, what we think will make the company money, what we think and what we imagine will make our product grow and be successful. Oh, we do user research, we do interviews, market research, competitor analysis, benchmarking, we set up personas, draw out user journeys, everything we can. Get a little bit of data, get that little bit of edge, trying to predict the future. And this is because of every single product manager, your employer demands this growth mindset. You have been employed. You work in this industry because you want to build something that grows. It's expected of you. It's probably why you're here. And this is exactly where this mindset, where this thinking about anti-fragility, where the understanding of this, where this comes into play. The question is, how do we create products that will grow and adapt and become stronger and stronger over time? Okay, for me personally, a good start for this is realizing that we have to accept risk. We have to accept uncertainty. And accepting that risk and accepting uncertainty in order to learn is actually a great thing. That learning and then also realizing failure in and of itself isn't bad. It's never bad because every product we work on is a work in progress. Nothing is ever completed. So let's drill a little bit more into the why. Why does this matter? Why it matters to us as product managers or product owners or product leaders, whatever your title, if you're in industry, this matters to you. So a couple of examples. I'm going to take a step back, give a little bit of history, and you can see how this plays out. So we talk about software development. And I can ask you why agile development supplanted the old waterfall style of software development. I mean, on the surface, waterfall development is robust. Very, very much so. You spend 3 months, 4 months, 6 months doing a massive piece of analysis, called a BRD, BRS, some similar fancy acronym. And in that documentation, in that analysis, you try and cover every conceivable use case, every feature. You try and predict every scenario that this product is going to hit. You try and uncover every single dependency. Now, this on the surface, this is great. It's very safe. Your stakeholders love it. They know exactly what they will get. The investors are happy. They know they can predict, okay, next 12 months, we're going to be building these things. That's easy. Your developers, generally they can predict pretty accurately how long development will take. And you chuck this big piece of documentation over the fence, and 6 months, 9 months later, coding, most likely extensive testing, and you get exactly what you described. Normally, every single specification has been hit. You get everything you described, everything you want, you get it. Except now it's 12 months or longer since you started. Your market has moved on, and the customer hates your product, hates what you've built, or even worse, is indifferent. They don't want to use what you've built anymore. They don't want to pay for it. So 6 months worth of analysis, 6 months worth of development, a year on that, dead, wasted. You're not getting that back. That's a big risk that you took and it didn't pay out. So Agile, and this is why it supplanted Waterfall, when Agile development in their ideal form, when it holds to the Agile manifesto, not that it always does, that's pretty anti-fragile. That's not the point of this webinar. I'm not here to sell you on Agile because, let's be fair, anybody working in product management, it's going to be very rare for you to be in a company that doesn't at least, pay lip service to Agile or uses some version of it to develop the software. In theory, Agile means releasing faster, learning from your releases, adapting. Smaller investments with quicker returns. And that's the core concept there. Building just enough that you can fail and fail fast and learn and figure out what works. That's important. And I want you to remember that for later, because I'll come back to that. So we, as an industry, realized, trial and error, that by this building in small increments and allowing the option to change when our products start to meet the real world and get put into front of real customers, that's better than locking in something massive. It's safe and it's robust, but it's ultimately wrong. Another example, real world example, not software related this time. Fukushima, Japan, 2011. Site of, this is awful. It's one of the worst ever nuclear disasters in the world. Only one on that scale, Chernobyl. I think those are the only two in the world that ever got a category 7 rating, something like that. That disaster, it followed, came after, it was caused by the worst ever tsunami that Japan has ever experienced. In the words of Taleb, who wrote Anti-Fragile, that is a black swan event, so far outside of the predicted future that no one thought it could be that bad. Way worse than anything that came before it, completely off the charts. And it caused a disaster. Again, no one planned for it. No one thought a tsunami could be that bad. We as humans, we're pretty bad at that kind of prediction. Anything that goes outside the norm, all things considered. So we're talking about the worst tsunami, the worst disaster. But the response here, this is the important thing, and this is what we want to pay attention to. The focus of the nuclear companies here turned to this concept of exposure to failure. Rather than trying to predict failure and trying to prevent that, so what did they do? Smaller reactors embedded very deep in the ground. Failure, if it happens, will still be terrible, but it won't, and it will be costly, but it won't be a disaster. So that concept there, exposure to failure, rather than trying to build to withstand every single outside stressor, it's another important one to remember. So 2 points from the 2 examples. Failure is good. It's not bad. It's just small. And being open to this failure, thinking about what it would mean if things failed, that's critical. Okay, one last example. Last example from why thinking about anti-fragility matters. Let us consider Netflix. The big red N, that's the OG streaming service. I mean, recently their content has probably been a little bit more questionable in terms of the quality. Not the point of this. You all know it. You're all familiar with Netflix. What is important for us here is their approach to network engineering. And this is the example I want you to think about. Many years ago, I started streaming. Netflix created this little bit of code. They called it the Chaos Monkey. So what the Chaos Monkey does is simple at heart. It randomly started by randomly deactivating a Netflix server in their production environment, not in QA, not in dev, in real world servers that people are using to stream, where the streaming content is being hosted. And people thought they were crazy. I mean, this is insane. Why are you doing this in production? And yet, this has taught them to respond to randomness. So it's taught them to accept failure and how to build their production environment to accept this, how to build this to be resilient, how to build it to be anti-fragile. In fact, this Chaos Monkey, it was great. It worked so well, and they kept on running with this. It could knock out any number of servers. And you as a consumer watching Netflix, you wouldn't even realize. They exactly timed it at what point people would start to complain how long it'd take, what the lag would be. They kept playing with us, even in mid-episode, if you couldn't log in, whatever happened. Very, very resilient network as a result, but they got better. So they felt this didn't go far enough. So they created something called Chaos Kong. So what Chaos Kong does is it effectively knocks out an entire AWS region. Now, this is something that I don't think that almost never, ever happens. And yet for Netflix, should that happen, the entire North American region of AWS goes down. As a consumer, you wouldn't even know. Their network is that resilient, that anti-fragile, because they are open to this concept of failure and learning from it. So 3 examples given you. Agile software development, Fukushima nuclear disaster, Netflix Chaos Monkey, Chaos Kong. They demonstrate the same points. Failure is good, and by allowing for randomness, you make your product or your system stronger, not weaker. So, step back. History lesson done, I promise. Now, how do I apply this anti-fragility as a product manager? How do I bring this into my day-to-day as a product manager? Quick recap. The anti-fragile system product is something that grows stronger from being exposed to stress, from failure, and from being exposed to the unpredictable. That failure is good, not bad. And I really believe that mindset is absolutely critical to being a great product manager. And again, let me stress, I am not here to sell you a methodology or pretend that standing here in front of you, I bring you all the answers, because I don't. I am only here to talk to you about a mindset, and it's one that works for me. It's not a methodology. But the real question now, as is written on the screen, how do I use this? What does this actually mean for me in my day-to-day job as a product manager? And now here's where we get to the really fun part. Think about this. The most innovative companies in the world, the fastest growing ones, they are all customer obsessed. They are obsessed with experiments. They are, even if they do not articulate this, anti-fragile. So I'm going to list now 4 elements that I consider essential. And again, for me, in my day-to-day job at Sennder, I am trying to implement all of these. It's not always easy. It is challenging, but I believe in them. And I think these are essential for building great products. So the 4 are, you need to have a growth mindset. You need to be driven by very good data. You need a culture of continuous experimentation. And you really need an incremental approach to all of this. There are probably more items. And I guess if I present this in a year or so from now, that list will have grown. But they are what I have for now. So let's work through them one by one. So first, a growth mindset. So what do I mean by this? I know it's expected from every product manager, but what does it mean? For you and for me, it means that essentially you accept that the work is never done. Nothing is ever done. Nothing is ever good enough, ever complete. You can always improve. You can get more customers, you can get a better experience, you can expand into a new market segment, etc., etc. You can always grow. And what does it also mean for the mindset? It also means that really, if you have a growth mindset, you accept the risk of failure, because something that you do is not going to work. It is going to fail. But that means that you will have learned something. And so you need this growth mindset, because this will help you to persist through obstacles. It will allow you to persist and keep going. So, sorry about that. Okay. So we humans, we are very bad at prediction. I mentioned this before. We really suck at predicting the future, at knowing what will be the next big trend. Let's not even talk about trends. We don't even know what tomorrow's important thing will look like. Hell, for you, those of you working as product managers, have any of you ever seen a 3-month roadmap deliver exactly according to plan and to what was predicted? With the best will in the world, that doesn't happen. If it does, it's so rare to be the absolute exception. In my opinion, traditional roadmaps suck and they're not worth the paper they are printed on. And they suck because random things happen. Unplanned things happen. The market changes. Your most senior stakeholder, and you know what I'm talking about here, your most senior stakeholder, the one with the actual authority to override things and to get what they want, suddenly has a bright idea, and now you have to adapt. You have to change your roadmap. You have to start working on something else. You can maybe have a trade-off conversation, but you're going to have to adapt. Okay, I don't want to start ranting about roadmaps, because at this point in my life and my career, I consider them a little bit of a sad and probably necessary evil. I think they're incredibly useless for the amount of time and effort that goes into them, because uncertainty always happens and it will win, but senior stakeholders seem to expect it, and we produce them. So talking about uncertainty then, that doesn't mean that you cannot allow that uncertainty into your life, that you cannot plan and you cannot set up things so that no matter what happens, your product will grow and gain. Your product will become anti-fragile. But without this growth mindset, without the determination to keep going, and most importantly, without the willingness to accept some risk, you're not ever going to achieve real growth. Welcome the changes that come. Prepare for them to happen, not specifically, but in general, because they will happen. Every single company I have ever worked for had these random events come in and throw plans into disarray. So, what is your most powerful tool in getting your product to go in the right direction? Being driven by good data and using that data to make decisions. And just like before, I'll make probably what's a controversial statement now. A large amount of data is toxic. And the more you have, the more toxic it gets. Today, you have such a wealth, an abundance of data available. You don't even really have to try to get it. It will flood in. Basic analytics toolset on your product. You will get swamped in data, and that will kill your decision making, as will kill your product. And the more complicated the system that you are responsible for, the more data that's going to be produced, and the harder it will be for you to actually use that data correctly. So I'm probably just going to have to qualify that statement just a little bit, or I'm going to face the wrath of the data analysts and pretty much everyone in the cult of big data, where algorithms and machine learning takes place. So my actual problem is this: if you look at too much data, there's a signal to noise ratio. It gets worse and worse and worse. The more data that you have and the more frequently you look at that data, the worse that signal to noise ratio is going to get for you. So being driven by good data is so very hard. Analysis and interpretation of data is hard. And the worst cases sometimes is where data is used to justify something that you already knew you wanted to do. So you're just finding just enough little bit of evidence that you're doing the right thing. You validate the idea and you do not take a single step further. So you want to focus on the right data. Every experiment that you run needs an hypothesis and data to disprove it or to prove it. Be clear, can go either way, always be open for both. and be very clear on your input and your output metrics. So you will have to rely on data. I just said it's hard, but you will have to rely on it. Data, metrics, data. If you're lucky enough, fortunate enough to have a good product analyst in your team, protect them, because they will filter out the noise for you. So every experiment that you do requires a hypothesis to be set, something that you want to prove. You want a set of results for an experiment that will allow you to make a decision, an understanding of what is your leading and what is your lagging metrics. So you either need to be really, really good at something like SQL or even R or Python if you're very hardcore, or you need an excellent analyst as part of your team. For me, the combination of a good product manager and a good product analyst is an incredibly strong one. So on this topic, a last comment here, not entirely related, but close enough, and I feel strongly about this. You have to be very, very, very clear when you're starting to look at data, starting to determine which are the metrics. Which metrics are your input metrics, sometimes called leading metrics, and which are your output or your lagging metrics. So the input ones are the ones you have to obsess about. Those are the ones that you can directly influence. They are the levers that you pull to move your output metrics. Output metrics, those are what the CEO, COO, all the high-ups, the board, they care about the output metrics, the ultimate performance. You care as a product manager, you care intimately about the input metrics. They are where you focus your time, your attention, and the experiments that you do as a product manager. And that then goes neatly into my third point. The third aspect of building this anti-fragile mindset. Continuous experimentation. You have to continuously be doing experiments. Let me be clear on that. The best companies and the best product teams run hundreds, thousands of experiments in a month, in a quarter, normally in their production environment, because an experiment needs to be put in front of real customers. The most famous, I guess, example from around here in the Netherlands, Booking.com, which is based here, very famous for it. They have a culture of experimentation, of testing hypothesis, and they have the leadership understanding and the buy-in. This culture has permeated the whole company to make it work. To the point where you and I, if we log into the same site, Booking.com, the odds of us seeing the exact same website at the same time, if we use different browsers and different computers to log in, is pretty slim, actually. Somewhere on that page, something is going on, something is being measured. Data is being generated, data that they're going to use to make a decision. What works, what doesn't, what do we want to do? This works better, this doesn't work at all. All of this grows into the product, grows, it becomes stronger and stronger. Why do you do this? Well, at the core of it, and what an experiment does, and the small experiment, the continuous experiments, not one or two big bang ones, but this continuous experimentation, small experiments, what this does is you're basically taking some of the risk out of your assumptions. Why would you make one or two big bets when you can make 100 or 1,000 smaller ones? And if even one of those really takes off, that's the one you want. You can have great success with a small amount of effort. And why are we doing this? Well, as I said before, we really suck at predictions. I do, you do, we all do. That's just the truth of it. So what you're doing by this continuous experimentation culture, effectively you're building up your risk tolerance. The risk tolerance of your product allows you to validate your hypothesis and then to pivot, change. And this is important. And I'm talking about real experiments here. So please do not ever talk to me about focus groups. I don't know if anybody else has said this, but don't ask people what they want. Or if even worse than that, don't ask people what they think they're going to want tomorrow. There's absolutely nothing worse to me, other than a mild roadmap, than this vague, fuzzy piece of market research. Okay, we're not all Steve Jobs, but one aspect of his approach to new product development that I massively respect He had his imagination and he trusted that and he followed that and he believed and clearly stated that's what he believed. People do not know what they want until you confront them with it by putting an experiment in front of them, seeing what they do. So the best experiments really, these are the ones where you have a very clear idea of what you want to test and why you want to test it. You will have a clear outcome that you want to validate, and this outcome that once you validate it or disproved it, again, validate or disprove. If it's wrong, own that. That's why we talked about failure earlier. Most of these will be wrong. So you validate or you disprove your assumption, and that then allows you to pivot as necessary. Well, basically could be normal enough for product managers, but for me, where I get really specific about this is in the size and the frequency of the experiments. I'm not talking one big one every couple of weeks. Constant, smaller is better. Smaller is better because they take less investment. They take less risk. And yet you have so much that you can gain from even the smallest experiment. And do this constantly. Not just you. Involve your team, involve your developers, involve the teams, involve your stakeholders. Ask people what they want to try and why they want to try it. And if it's a big thing, then you break that down into a series of smaller experiments that will make your product stronger. Remember when I talked about Netflix? What happens if we knock out some servers? Well, I found out. And they accepted the outcome of that, and they used the results of that to build something better. And that is the idea that you want to replicate. So I'm back to experiments. I think the following is pretty clear, showing this is kind of the theory behind it. So on the x-axis, lots of experiments, the outcomes demonstrated in terms of gain, loss. On the y-axis, small experiments, frequent experiments, you just need that one to be successful, and that's the one that you follow. And that D takes some of the risks out of your assumptions. You are building your risk tolerance. So lastly, that brings me to the fourth and final point, this incremental approach. So I've basically described this already, but I really do want to formalize it again now. Incremental means we're not making huge, risky bets. Why would you do that? Large risk, large amount of uncertainty. What you want to do is you want to take that uncertainty and you want to break it into smaller pieces, smaller experiments. Again, you are in the business as a product manager. You are de-risking your assumptions by continuously testing them gradually. I mean, this takes time. It takes time. It takes commitment. It takes that growth mindset where, not everything I do. In fact, most of the things I try, they're not going to work. But you can do this. If someone comes to you and say they want to try out something huge, as a product manager, that's your job. Break that down into a series of smaller experiments. Run them over time. Do it gradually. You get the data, you make the decisions, you validate, and you pivot if necessary. Talking multiple small experiments and constantly experiment. In the world of anti-fragility, I'm talking about many, many smaller shocks and stressors on the system. That's evolution. That's how you evolve a good product into a great one. And to be fair, I know this is hard to do. Sometimes it requires cultural changes and it requires leadership buy-in. And for you as a product manager, it really takes planning and commitment. You got to be smart about this. Ask me what methodology to use for the experimentation. Yeah, pick whatever works for you. Prioritization framework, same. Pick any, get going. Which one goes first doesn't matter. We're talking about a mindset here. We're not talking about a methodology, but a mindset. This is how you think about the discipline of product management. So, in summary, that was quite a lot, and I really hope everybody is still awake. And before we move into the Q&A part of the webinar, if there are any questions, just a quick summary of what we talked about, just to really land this for you. Anti-fragility, it's the concept of something that gains, that improves from being exposed to the random and the unexpected. And this matters, really matters, because it's a mindset that you adopt. It's not a methodology that you enforce, not a framework. And it will really, really help you as a product manager. And you can apply this by you adopt this growth mindset where nothing is ever finished and you accept failure and you welcome it. You adopt this mindset. You make sure that you're driven by the good data, that you spend time figuring out which metrics matter, and you use that data and you use that to inform your decisions. And you're doing experiments. You're continuously doing experiments. And to hammer that home, not big experiments, incremental approach, smaller experiments over a period of time. That's what you want to do. So thank you all. And I hope that was interesting.
I think it was just wow, Christo. Last 30 minutes was pure gold. Whatever you spoke, it really kind of went really well with the audience, and I could see quite a few of them kind of resonating big time with the kind of words that you just narrated. Big learning for a lot of folks, and I think you can. I mean, I don't have to tell this. You can just read it on the chat window. People are super amazed with what you just narrated. First of all, a big thank you for that valuable 30 minutes that you shared with us. There were so many things that we could have kind of captured from this. And to make your life a little more difficult, I do have quite a few of challenging questions, not only from the folks here sitting here in Zoom, but also folks who are attending via social media on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook, right? So I'll just collate all the queries, but to get started, I have a beautiful query. This is about accepting chaos is what this entire session was all about, right? That we got to accept chaos. So we have this person who says that a lot of these chaos actually happens in in products that are in startup companies. A lot of this chaos happens because they actually don't have any planning for what do they really need to do down the line. And I mean, I can resonate with that because we ourselves are a startup. So I think it's a very hard problem that startups are trying to solve themselves, which is the chaos that is created because of lack of clarity. Now, clarity is something that is not quite evident even in larger companies, and let alone be startups. They're literally struggling with it. So how do you think this chaos can be worked to their own benefit? So how do you kind of plan things around this chaos so that you all not only get a direction, because I mean, lack of planning happens because lack of direction. So how do you uncover those directions? And second is, how do you communicate these directions? So how do we refocus our energies in this chaos to make it valuable for the company?
Wow, that is a really good question. So let me see if I understand this correctly. You're asking, how do I take this chaos that's quite natural in a startup environment, and how do I kind of get direction from that? And then how do I communicate that direction?
Right. So I think probably I'll give you an example here. Probably, if I understand correctly, I think this should also help you. So something like in established products, right? Something like booking. Right? Booking runs almost thousands of tests every day.
Yeah.
Right? And that's only possible because you have achieved a certain scale and you have a certain number of people who can think beyond the box and come up with different ideations or different ideas that they can kind of test out.
Yes.
In a startup with limited resources, how would this work, especially when there's lack of clarity on what is the next step for them?
Well, I mean, this is where the fun part of product management really comes in. This is where strong product managers should shine, because everybody has a vision. No one starts a company going, yeah, we're starting a company doing, we don't know. We're just starting a company because everybody starts companies. Now, everybody has something that they want to do. So that's a concept. So what's the job of the product manager? I didn't talk about it here, but the job of the product manager is to kind of capture that vision and consolidate that and set a series of goals. So that's kind of basics of the job. You want to say, this is where we're going to go. So now you say limited resources. That's fine. We don't have to run thousands of experiments, but at least do one. So do our customers prefer it if this thing is blue? I mean, simplest, if this is blue or red. The most basic of A/B tests, start there. That's small. That doesn't take a lot of time, a lot of investment. Okay, well, we've put it in front of our customers, and you have to, by the way, in front of customers. It doesn't have to be software. I mean, you can even do paper prototypes if it comes down to it. That takes even less investment, but get it in front of real people, because that's where you're going to learn. Otherwise, you live in theory land, and that's where nothing ever goes wrong. And every learning that you do, document it. And that's going to build out that puzzle for you. Every step, make that information available, evangelize it. When you talk to your stakeholders, when you talk to your engineering team, hey, yeah, we tried this and this happened. Yeah, and then we tried this and then we saw that happened. And so that means obviously we think we're going in this direction. That's our current best guess. And when we get there, we're going to do another experiment, then we're going to try. And be open to pivot, be open to learn. As a product manager, it's going to be your job. And this is hard. I mean, I don't know if I make it sound easy now, but it is hard. You've got to take that and condense that down and say, this is where we're going. It's up to you to take that vision. And maybe the company founder has another vision. You go, okay, but how are we going to get there? He knows where we want to go, but how do we get there? How do I break that down into steps? What tests do I need? Ask yourself, not just what needs to be proven correct for us to get there, but what needs to be proven wrong to show, what's the negative that's also going to guide us? Be open to that failure. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but I mean, I can talk about this for a long time, probably.
Well, I think that kind of gives quite a bit of clarity here. So it's basically in such companies, it's either the founders who should have that vision documented into smaller bits of goals that they can achieve, or is the job of a product manager if they have sufficient funding. In fact, a lot of startups can't afford a product manager from day one, right? So It usually boils down to founders thinking to what next. And then eventually, I think as they kind of grow, they start acquiring more product managers. And the sole goal of product managers is to translate the vision into small, bite-sized, achievable outcomes. And in this, you mentioned a beautiful idea that, and in fact, this is a question by, I think, Gaurav. This is around on similar lines that you mentioned that tests need not only be software-driven tests, right? So from your experience, what kind of tests can we kind of conduct on our products that we can kind of put to use in possibly every type of product that you can think of?
So not just software tests. So software tests can be done, and you need capacity for that. That's always going to be your conversation that you have with your engineering team. How much capacity do you have? Ideally, a lot. But if you don't, I've done successful tests before we use a tool, Figma. If everybody's familiar with that allows you to do a mock-up as a high fidelity prototype. That's good. Step back. You can even use sticky notes, pen and paper. Like, you'll be surprised at the amount of insight you can get. Literally draw it out, put it in front of someone who uses your product. Say, hey, I know you use this thing, but if this box over here, if we change that and we add that and we do that, and then you can learn so much from that. I mean, there's a bunch of different experiments, different kinds of experiments that you can do. And I don't know if we have time to really get into detail, but we're talking, even when you get to software, you can do, A/B testing, you can do the concierge, the wizard test, you can do the smokescreen test, check how many people click on a button. Okay, there's a demand for the service, all of these kind of like well-known ones. All of this. But yeah, in terms of not using software, man, pen and paper. It's the best tool you'll ever have.
Yeah, I think that's pretty interesting. I mean, using a pen and paper to do tests in today's world, in this century, and a lot of people have forgotten that idea. So I think
it takes no investment, man. It's no investment in that.
Yeah. I think that it's a good time to recap the idea and get back to basics. So I think that's a pretty interesting insight, Christo. I have a question by Bhagat. This is big companies do perform business continuity disaster recovery exercise by randomly bringing down data centers and see traffic going to different data centers. However, we still see things failing when it happens naturally in the insights. This is something that does happen. I mean, there's no 100% foolproof system. So, but we got to accept, even Google failed, right? Google, that literally has the best tech talents across the world, their servers went down. So probably, Christo, you want to add something here, because I feel it's natural. We're humans, and technology can always go back.
It is, and I think the thing is, there is what you want to do, in that you want to, I would say, de-risk that. Like what Netflix did. They know things get knocked over, and they built their system to take it over. This is in their production environment now. So for them, instead of trying to protect against this failure, DR recovery, disaster recovery is normally, okay, well, the server goes down and then we call this guy and that's an automatic thing that happens. No one even needs to be informed. And it's not always, I think the question can also be asked, it's not just what the server goes down, it's what's the customer experience? What does the customer want? The user of our product. Well, in the Netflix example, it's like they want to keep watching their stream. They don't even want to know that there's something wrong. So how do we do that? How do we keep this up? How do we spread out that risk? How do we, what different areas, what other servers do we have in that example that can take over this load? Things like that. I'm not sure if I answered the question fully, but it's a really good one. A little bit more technical, but really, really good question.
Yeah, I think, disaster recovery is something that every business tries to kind of achieve, but also whatever measures you take, there'll always be a downtime. Somewhere or other, not because of human mistakes necessarily, it could be because of natural disasters as well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, give and take, there's no way any system can be 100% perfect. And accepting that and respecting that, I think that is what really makes us human. But yeah, once you face such issues, obviously the company does its best to kind of come back online as soon as possible. And after that, how do you communicate to the customer? That is something that's really valuable.
Yes.
So when you kind of apologize to your customers and mention them why it went down and how it was one-off case, which ideally should not occur down the line. I mean, that's where you show the true colors of great leaders and great product companies. So moving on to the next question, how do you convince your peers and superiors? So this is by VR. I don't know what's VR's full name. Definitely not virtual reality, I assume. Peers and superiors that you are preparing for anti-fragility, but you will prepare for failure. Okay, that's almost the opposite. Yeah. So what VR implies is, so usually, I mean, as a product manager, we always talk to our peers and superiors on how do we achieve success. Now, if you're telling them just the opposite, the anti-success, when you're telling them that we are going for anti-fragility, okay, that's like you're preparing them for failure, right? So how would people kind of perceive this information and look at you as a product manager? I mean, how would they think about you as a product manager?
At first, I look at you and going, what on earth is wrong with you? Ask me. I know I've asked that question. When you try and pitch it, you can see their faces at the start and go, we're preparing for failure. And no one wants to hear that. Like, what's wrong with you? But then it all becomes about the language that you use, and it depends on your audience. So if you start talking about reducing risk, if you start talking about smaller investments with much larger rewards potentially, that's the kind of language you need to use. If you just talk about we're preparing for failure, and no one's ever gotten like a promotion because I prevented this thing. In theory, it never happened, but I was responsible for it not happening. How do you prove that? So yeah, you have to talk to your stakeholders in the language they understand. And in my experience, only again, I don't have all the answers, but my experience so far, really talking about reducing the risk, because that is something that's clear. That's language that's understood. And by making the investment smaller for more gain, that then becomes, and that you can see, then it starts to become something that they understand and they want to buy into.
All right. We are a little short on time, but I'll try to squeeze in one more question for you, Christo. Now, this question, I think I'll have to combine two questions here and make it into one. So there's a question that is related to data and the data being bad, and there's a question related to metrics. So I'll just club both the questions and just reframe it in my words. So the question stands like this: that one is amidst all the data that we are capturing, right? There's a lot of data that's unnecessary. Like, since data is cheap today, so people are just capturing left, right, center. They're capturing every possible data that's out there. How do we find value out of that data? I understand it's a very broad question and will be really tough to answer it in a minute. But to add to that, it's about the metrics, the input-output metrics, the part where you mentioned about input-output metrics. Do these evolve? Like, let's say you set certain input-output metrics for your product? And do these actually evolve down the line? And even if they do evolve, how do you identify what is the next best metric that you should be considering? So it's a question where you don't have total clarity on the best metric. I mean, you have some idea, usually because every product manager usually they're trained, right? So you get an idea that, okay, here a North Star metric is about user acquisition, or this North Star metric is about so and so. But over a period of things do evolve, how should you adapt to it and figure out what is the right metric? So yeah, probably a little complicated question, but probably you can help us out here.
Let us see. Let's tackle first in the question of good data and bad data. I mean, I would just say work with a data analyst. Like, work with a data analyst. They have the training that I don't have. I mean, I've got a smattering of SQL ability myself, but I need someone to really sift through it and start to really find where this comes from. So really interrogate that. Like, where does this come from? Where did we get this? When did we get this? Ask those questions. It's the quality of the data, and that will help. Sorry, I know we're almost out of time. And then the other one, yeah, of course, metrics change. That's the whole point of it. No, nothing's ever static. In the output metric, the output metric changes slowly over time. That's the North Star. That's the vision. That's what your founder wants. But your input metrics, those change all the time, I hope. Because you're looking for levers to pull. You're looking, what do I pull to may have the biggest effect on the output one? And these are the ones that you can directly influence. That's what makes it so critical. And identifying these correctly. I mean, I drive my team to do this. This is a hard exercise. It's not something you do in 30 seconds or half an hour or an hour even. This takes hours of work to get right. And it's never done. And it's never right. You think you know something, you spend hours on doing it. And then eventually, if you're like, oh, actually, I didn't think about this. So also this whole growth mindset, the input metric is not something you set down. It's not static. Yeah, they're probably valid for a period of time, but that's going to evolve. Some will become less valid. Other ones will come in. And that helps to grow. Again, that helps to grow the product. Never sleep on these things. Always evolve them, always grow them. That's how you grow. And that's how your product grows. And I think that's probably as much as I can answer in this session.
Yeah, I mean, cool. I think, it's at times. So, I mean, yeah, it's really hard to cover so many complicated questions. In fact, I had to skip quite a few because of lack of time. But Christo, one small point here. I think some really brilliant questions are being asked, and because of lack of time, we couldn't address all of them. I hope you're open to people who would like to connect with you over LinkedIn and possibly.
Of course. Totally.
Right. So, friends, please feel free to connect with Christo, and I mean, you got a first-hand exposure as to how clearly Christo can decomplexify these topics and make it so simple that anybody can really understand it. It's so beautiful. And especially, I love the examples Christo picked up. A lot of these are actually also frequently used for product management training purposes as well. So do keep a watch out on things that Christo is doing. Follow him over LinkedIn, and there's a lot that we can learn from him. So Christo, once again, on behalf of the entire community, thanks a lot for your valuable time and for sharing that valuable knowledge that you have gained over the years of experience that you hold. So thanks a lot for that, Christo, and we really appreciate you.
Thank you so much. It was genuinely a pleasure. I love talking to people. I love spreading knowledge about product management, like anytime. And feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Ask me. I eventually get around to responding to all the questions or comments on LinkedIn. I'm pretty bad at that, and I apologize. So if I don't immediately respond, that's just me being me. It's not because I don't like your question. I will get around to it. I promise you. And then, I'm just linking in the chat, little one-pager summary. Just you can grab that as a reference point for you. Just captures the full, because the slides in of themselves, normally I would make them available, but they don't work because you need the voiceover. But feel free to use that, copy that, take a look at that. Everybody, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your evening. I mean, that you came and listened to me talk about this stuff. I really appreciate every one of you.
Thank you, Christo. I think you can have a look at the chat window.
Oh, wow.
He's really quite impressed with the way you conducted the session today. So, so thank you all, friends. I just reshared Christo's link by mistake. Christo just sent it to the panelist. I shared it to everyone. Please download this file. It's a PDF file. It has Christo's coordinates, and it also has all the summary of all the slides that Christo used here. It's good. It's a probably it's a one pager, but it has knowledge worth probably a few thousand pages. So please keep it handy. It's going to help us in our product management journey. So thank you everybody. You may all terminate your sessions now. We are done for today. Thank you, Christo.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Bye.
You too.